still, as a follower of Jesus, I'm still to be marked by love.
David kind of gave us a glimpse of that. He said, you know, I'm never going to give anything to God that isn't of value.
There probably are people who would love for God to speak to them. Are you ready to hear what he has to say?
I mean, like, I physically had to say, okay, you know, and open up my hands and say, what do you want to do here?
But I think doing life with one another isn't just showing up at a coffee shop, going through a book and talking about it and going home.
Well, good morning. How you doing? Hope you're doing well. It's me, Josh Herrema, here with my co-host, Pastor Ryan Bibb. How are you doing this morning, Pastor Ryan Bibb?
I'm doing well. You totally threw me off. You totally did a different intro there.
I know.
I like it, but I'm doing well.
Trying to mix it up. Welcome to episode 41 of Radio Reflections. This is, what are we on, part 4? Part 4 of our Politics and Faith series here. We've had a few of these episodes under our belt now. And this time we jump into what we were calling the game of red versus blue. For all you Halo fans out there. I think that was Halo, right?
I have no idea.
On Xbox, it was red v blue.
Okay.
Right? I don't know. I'm terrible at video games, so like I would always get killed right away in Halo. But we want to talk a little bit about what it looks like to live out our faith in a very polarized, bipartisan culture. And then after this episode, and there'll be some overlap here, we will also jump into just some issues, and try to not just like talk about specific issues. There will be a little bit about that, but also how do we weigh the issues when it comes to voting. So that
we may disagree.
Yeah, and that's all right.
Well, we know at least one of the questions we will disagree on, which is awesome.
So,
but I've really enjoyed it. I mean, I've enjoyed our 3 previous ones. I've just enjoyed trying to understand what it's like to follow Jesus, stay true to him above everything, but yet how do we handle government and politicians that aren't following Jesus, that are doing things that we disagree with? Like, how does... This is fun waters to navigate. This has been fun. I hope viewers and listeners, so you guys are enjoying it. And it's okay to disagree with us. We are not sitting here in the chairs as experts again. We are just trying to figure out what does it look like to truly live out Jesus, our rabbi, our savior of this world, 2,000 years later in a government system that was not, in the times, biblical. I'm not saying what we have is unbiblical. It's just we don't have biblical precedent for the governing body that we have today. So what does it look like? It's fun to navigate those waters. We hope you grow and learn. That's all. Just grow and learn.
Yeah, and we're not experts. And I do want to mention once again some of the resources that we've used.
Do you have them with you?
I only have one of them on my chair today.
Last week you had a ton.
I did, and I was like, man, it got really hard to sit in my chair with all those all those books in here. But a couple of things that we have worked through in preparation for this is a book by David Platt called Before You Vote. He's a pastor. Chuck Colson's God and Government. We referenced that last week in the episodes. Honoring God in Red or Blue by Dr. Amy Black. And then the short little read called God in Politics by Mark Deaver. Those are some of the resources. I would encourage you, especially, and I will reference part of the David Platt book today. You still have time. If you get this on Amazon and you have Prime, you can get this and knock this out. This is 7 questions to ask before you vote. I will reference a tool that he uses, but especially if you're listening, it's going to be really hard to like actually grasp it without the visual, because it's a visual tool. So, but there we go.
Yeah, and I want to say, those resources are, in my eyes, those resources you mentioned are very neutral. Yes. Because I think you can go searching for what you want to find and supplement your belief system. You'll find it. We're giving you very neutral resources.
Right. The thing I love about this David Platt book is at the end of it, like, because at the end, like, the last question is, how should I vote? How do I vote? And maybe people pick this up thinking, sweet, he's going to tell me which candidate best represents this. But spoiler alert, he doesn't do that. He gives you the tools to put your faith into practice as you cast your ballot. Yep. So I love that. I love that. So, all right, you ready to jump into red v blue?
I am. Just remember, help me along in this process. Here we go.
So, there might be a lot of people within our whether it's within our country or just within our listening and viewing audience, right, that they tie their political choices to their faith. The issue, though, is some people might say, well, hey, I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus, so I vote Republican. And you think, okay. But then you have others who say, well, I'm a Christian. I want to follow Jesus, so I'm going to vote Democrat. And then you have people that say, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm going to vote Libertarian or some third party independent, whatever it is. So it's not so clear cut as, oh, well, I guess, you're a Christian. This is the party you vote for. But take a few minutes here and unpack for us what are some ways that each party embodies different aspects of living like Jesus.
So I think we do live in a culture right now where I think it's slowly fading, this idea. There was an idea 40, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, that if you are Christian, you do vote Republican. I mean, that was a very strong thing. And you're seeing certain things over time just fade here and there with that idea. Yes, I think more and more, maybe just because I'm going to say this because I feel like I'm young and I've voted in several elections, but not maybe as many as some of the listeners and viewers have. But I mean, I am seeing more and more Christians, if you will, say I'm a Christian, but I'm a Democrat, or I'm a Christian, but I'm not a liberal Democrat. I'm more of a conservative Democrat, or I'm a Christian. I am going to vote. I don't like the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. I think the Libertarian Party is more of a biblical worldview. That's why I'm voting that, or whatever. I feel, and maybe it's, again, maybe I'm young and it's always been there. I just feel like that's the more narrative that's being spoken these days than in previous past. I made a statement a week or two ago that says I can make a pretty convincing argument that Jesus could be a Republican or Jesus could be a Democrat. I think there are things that all parties represent that I would say represent a biblical worldview. The Republican Party, is this where I'm supposed to give like examples?
You can. I mean, we probably won't do a super deep dive into issues because we'll do a deeper dive into some of the issues.
Okay, so I'm going to give the flyover real quick.
Give a flyover. Right? Okay. Just because there might be people listening that say, ain't no way there's a Democrat who's a Christian.
Gotcha.
And there might be people saying, ain't no way there's a Republican who's actually following Jesus. If they were really following Jesus,
they would vote.
They would vote, Democrat.
Okay. Okay.
So give us
help me out on some of these too.
That 30,000 foot view of just, again, different ways that each party, and you can, if you want, you can bring libertarians in, you can bring the Green Party, and you can
which I did some research on those parties yesterday, by the way. We'll see if that ever gets up into a discussion. So the Republican Party does, I think, an extremely well thing. They do a biblical worldview of sanctity of life. They do. Why are you smiling already? We just started the podcast and you're smiling.
So I'm trying to be happy.
Okay.
Smiling is
We'll get into
good
more
for you.
issues of the sanctity of life in the next podcast because you and I will disagree with some of the language there. But they are obviously anti-abortion. And I think they celebrate probably that worldview, that's the biblical worldview, extremely well. I'm going to jump now on another side real quick. We have a biblical mandate for creation, taking care of creation. It's a biblical mandate for us as followers of Jesus to take care of Christians. The Democratic Party does a way better job of environmental issues than the Republican Party does. So to me, the Democratic Party has better biblical worldview on the care of creation than the Republican Party does. And again, you can disagree. Like, this is just what I see, and I'm seeing cases for both. I think the Democratic Party has a stronger stance on taking care of orphans and widows and the poor than the Republican Party does. I think the Republican Party, though, does probably take care. I think the Republican Party probably does a better job of limiting government authority in our lives. And if you will, you want to stand for freedom, which I love this nation, and we have the freedom to worship. We have the freedom to do what we're doing now. I think the Republican Party has a better stance on limiting their own power and authority, governmental power and authority, and giving it more to the hands of the people. I think both parties fail at individual rights. Because as I said in the previous podcast, I do think rights in self we idolize, and it's been an idol in our life. And as followers of Jesus, we are to die to that. That's the narrative. Well, I have a right to. You died to yourself when you chose to follow Jesus. It's about Jesus and others. And so I think both parties fight with that. It's your right. It's your right. It's your right. No, I ought to be thinking about my neighbor first and foremost.
Just the interesting thing, and I don't want to get too much into issues here. They focus on individual rights, but they come at it from a different standpoint. So yes, which does make it difficult to say, oh, well, they both have like an unhealthy, you brought up, the abortion issue.
Yeah.
Right. So, maybe the Democratic Party historically has said, well, no, like this is an individual right. You cannot take away the individual right of the woman.
Right.
Yet, at the same time, for things like, several years ago, President Obama had the Affordable Care Act, healthcare. Hey, healthcare is an individual right, but to achieve that individual right, it requires taking away individual rights. So there is a little bit of a focus on the whole, the big picture. Yes, it's an individual right issue, but it's looking at the big picture versus maybe in some economic issues, the Republicans would be much more like, well, no, hey, dude, you can't tax the snot out of this rich guy. He worked really hard to make all that money. And, No. So they just come at it from different angles on different issues. And,
Keep talking, because my head was spinning for a moment, and I was trying to think of what I was going to say.
Because I got you off track, or?
But yeah, I realize there are certain things that I think, again, each party does better job. In my eyes, I'm just one guy. In my eyes, as a biblical worldview, than the other party, and I think both parties has a representation of a biblical worldview. Maybe one party does more than the other, perhaps depending on how you vote, what issues you vote on, which we'll get into in the next podcast. But I don't want to sit there if you're a Republican and listen and say there is nothing of Jesus in the Democratic Party, or if you're a Democrat listening and saying there's nothing of Jesus in the Republican Party or the Libertarian or the Green Party or whatever. There is biblical representation, worldview in both. I see it.
So now let's unpack the other side, and we hit on this a little bit, and maybe just by comparison you could you could draw these out. But I want to just be as clear as we can.
Oh, there's immigration. I didn't even talk who does a better job on immigration.
All right, did you want to hit on that real quick?
I may go into too much details.
Okay,
Can we do that on the next podcast?
We'll save that for the next podcast. That is in the list.
Okay,
for the next podcast.
Because I do side on one political party on immigration.
Okay, so I was part of a webinar. Not part, like I wasn't presenting. I was viewing a webinar, and there's a pastor named Albert Tate, whom you and I had the privilege of hearing teach at the Exponential Conference in Orlando right before the world went to crap with COVID.
Right before, like we were flying home. That was the last Sunday we were together. We were flying home that Saturday. And I remember looking at some of my friends that were also down there that we know of, pastors down at that conference, and they're like, my plane is full of people wearing masks, and it was like, what is happening to our nation right now? And then a week later, the nation gets shut down, so that was pretty crazy. But Albert Tate was there. He's so good.
Awesome. But I was in this webinar. He made a statement, and it really stuck with me. He said that followers of Jesus should not fit comfortably under the elephant or the donkey. We should only fit comfortably under the lamb obviously being a reference to Jesus. So we talked about some ways that each party embodies living like Jesus. What are some ways that each party falls short of a Jesus-shaped life?
So the one thing any government cannot promise us is the kingdom of heaven. Only God can. And again, I am thankful for living in this nation. We have freedoms that we do. I'm thankful for the men and women that serve in this nation to allow us to do what we do. So thankful for that. I'm thankful for government officials that try their best as they navigate waters that, again, half of the nation or state may dislike you and the half voted you in. I'm thankful for men and women who serve in those roles, very much so. But I know our hope is not in government ultimately. Our hope is in Jesus Christ. And that quote, dude, that's gold.
Yeah, that blew my socks. Like as soon as you said that, I like grabbed the sticky note. I was like, I gotta write that down.
Believers should not fit comfortably under the elephant or the donkey. We should fit comfortably under the lamb. Like, wow. And I think that actually relates well into the previous podcast that we did on faith and politics. Someone got a little more heated than the other, but that was the idea, right? Is we feel like this represents all, but it's not. I don't have a direct answer, and you may have to help me answer your question. I feel like it's the opposite of what I just said in the first question.
And that's why I say we did kind of hit on it, and I think we could listen like, oh, okay, well, I just wanted to for the sake of being crystal clear, so you said, hey, Republicans, they embrace a greater level of respect for the sanctity of life.
Yes.
Which you say, hey, that is a biblical value.
Life in general is a biblical value.
By contrast, you would say, so the Democratic Party, and I want to be careful to even use that language because I don't want to say that
it's not everyone.
To represent everybody who would vote Democratic. I mean, so let's say the current Democratic nominee. Right, so right now the Democratic nominee is Joe Biden.
Yep.
Versus he'll be facing now President Trump, who's the Republican candidate. Yep. You'd say, well, based on what he has said, what him and his running mate Kamala Harris have said, they do not have that level of respect for the sanctity of life, and so you'd say that would be something that would fall short of what God calls us to and what we have in Scripture.
But then I hear some things that the Democratic Party in their platform on the environment and the care for it, and then I read what the Republican, and I feel like, okay, Republican Party, you're a little short. I think the Democratic Party is looking a little more like Jesus and doing more of an effort where you guys are falling a little short on the effort of the mandate of creation care. So, yeah.
Okay. What are are there any other ones? Like I want to, maybe I'm just beating this horse till it's good and dead. But I mean, other ones we talked about, and we'll get in more, like we said, we'll get into more about immigration in the next episode because we'll dig into some more of the issues.
So the word socialism, the idea of socialism.
Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure where he's going with this. I think I know where he's going with this.
Here's what. Don't buckle up. Have a lot of grace here because I'm fumbling over the words. I think you guys will get it and it'll come across with. I think that in its purest form, socialism. There's elements of socialism in its purest form. Okay, I'm talking the purest form, not what we see today. Not the way that we've muddied socialism. There can be great things. What socialism does is there's something about caring. Yes, people don't work and the working people have to take care of the non-working people. But that's not socialism in its purest form. That's the muddiness that life has created right now, right? And I'm not a socialist. Please don't. What I want to say, though, is there's something there that looking out for one another is done more efficient in its purest form. That's why I repeat this thing, in its purest form than what we see right now in our current government system. like, again, it goes back to Jesus's, what's the greatest commandment? Love God. And the second is this, love your neighbors as yourself. We ought to be helping the poor. We ought to be helping the widows. We ought to be helping the orphans. We ought to be doing that as Christ followers. There is something to the purest form of socialism that allows it to happen better than we do with the current party system. Now, again, I'm not a socialist. I'm not there to fight. I'm not saying laziness is the answer to everything, because I know people say, well, socialism will just bring laziness and the hardworking people have to pay for the laziness. Like, again, please hear me. That's not the purest form. But how do we one another? And I think sometimes maybe one party's a little, here's more. Again, I'm more of a guy that sits there and goes, I'm okay with you taxing me a little bit more as long as those funds are used in a better way to enhance my neighbor's life. I'm okay with that.
Well, but even the objection you just made to socialism, right? That, hey, like now the hardworking people are going to have to, carry the weight of all the slackers out there. Like even that is a me-centered objection.
Well, yeah.
And I'm not saying that you were making it on your behalf, but I'm
right,
saying like that's the culture. They're like, hey, no, like I don't want to have to, pay for this person to be alive. I want to pay for me to.
But if this person isn't working because they actually truly have maybe, if you will, like a disability that you and I don't know of, but we have a tainted view to say, well, that person's just lazy and I'm hardworking. Why should I pay for them stuff? If it will better their life, by golly, I'm going to pay for your stuff. I think showing you Jesus, being the hands and feet of Jesus, is more important than what the self of, well, that's my money, that's my hard-working money, don't tell me what to do with my hard-working money. I think when we say that, we make life about me and not about the kingdom of God. It's just very, that's why I love this conversation. Like a lot of this is I'm literally just processing and thinking out loud as I'm speaking. This is why I love this episode. It's very difficult to follow Jesus in understanding what does it look like when we die to self? We have to understand, and I don't think in America we do a good job. We live the American dream, right? Which is great. Like, hey, go on those vacations, buy that. I'm not opposed to that at all. I just know we are called to die to self, and I think here as Christians in America, we do a horrible job of dying to self because we do make it about me. And I want to get retired at some point in my life, which it's going to be a long time before I can retire.
Maybe that'll be a separate issue because I actually don't think retirement. No, I don't want to go there.
I want to be able to give money away like crazy. And I'm going to say we have some incredible people at this church here at Radiant Life that do. They have a heart. God has blessed them this way or that way in just life, and that's what they do. They have a heart to help and give, is whether it's time, their treasure, their resources, whatever it is. I want to get to that point where I can do that, where I can look at my neighbor. Hey, my neighbor may be and I'm making this is fictitious. My neighbor may be a drug addict, but my heart breaks for them. And yeah, maybe that's not why they're working because they got an addiction problem, but I'm called to be Jesus to them and get them out of their brokenness and help them find hope and healing in Jesus Christ. I'll give them the money. I'll go pay for their counseling. And the caveat is there's many people on the other side that says, well, they just need to break that addiction. They need to work. They need to do this or that. I know, but they can't because they are so muddied and blinded by evil right now. And we have the hope. And why don't we get in the mud with them? And if it means I'll give you some money, I'm going to give you money to get healthy. I'll do it. I'll sacrifice. Something Jesus did for all of us. He sacrificed his life so that you and I can have life. We ought to be doing the same here in America as Christ followers.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And maybe this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, right? And maybe this is in a sense calling some people out because, you go, I want to bounce back, to what your objection again to socialism, right? It's very similar to me to when my kids, and this has happened with probably every one of my kids that is like able to, form sentences and have a conversation. Like something will happen, like, oh, hey, I took this kid, we went grocery shopping, and hey, I stopped by McDonald's and got that kid a cheeseburger. Well, the other kids, well, that's not fair, and so but fair to them means I wanted that. Now, if I had just taken that child and not the other ones, they wouldn't have complained at all whether or not it was fair. And I think this has, in a sense, played out the way we see adults approaching justice issues. I want to be careful here because this is like I'm just thinking out loud, right? But when there are some things that we look at as justice issues, and we say, "Oh, this isn't fair, this isn't just," and what we really mean if we dig down into our heart is, well, okay, let's go to your objection. Like, why should all the hardworking people pay for all the slackers? There might be some people who what they're really saying is, I want to be a slacker and have everybody pay for me.
You're right. There could be people
so it's like
that.
a tainted. It's not that you actually care, and this is not applied to everybody. Not applied to everybody. Please hear me. But again, it's you got to look at your heart and our ideas of fairness and justice. I think
our political system right now is very polarized. I mean, you hear the word, the Republican Party, the rich get richer, right? That's the statement in the Republican Party. The Democrat Party, steal from the rich, give to the poor. Those are two very polarizing things. So where do we as Christians stand? Where do we? I mean, I do believe we ought to help the poor. That's Jesus right there. But what exactly does that look like? And the method to do that, that's where the political system gets muddy.
Yeah. Well, and I do want to like, I'll probably upset some people here because again, we're not, I don't know, maybe not. Hopefully everyone listening is just a grace-filled, ready to know.
They are grace-filled because we're all trying to do this together.
And please hear us. This is not, I'll borrow Ryan's disclaimer. This is not me advocating for policies that are colored by socialism. But I pulled up a definition on Google here for socialism. It says it's a noun. It's a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. If you read about the church in Acts, I don't know, 2 and 4, I think more so, right? Go read that. I want everyone listening or watching, go read about the church. Again, I'm not saying that the early church was socialists, but they definitely had a different approach to things than what many of us do right now. So,
no. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I meant in the purest form. Again, I think what we do with, we hear the word socialism and we can freak out because we see it misused in awful ways in other countries, or we may have a potential political candidate that, people deem you run on a socialistic platform and that's his views, right? I mean, that's his views, what socialism is and whatever. But that's what I mean by in its purest form, we take care of each other.
Right.
And there's something powerful to that. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I want to read, again, and this is, and I'll invite your thoughts on this, because as I was finishing out the David Platt book, he has questions for everybody to ask. And again, this is aimed at primarily people that would look at it as a binary system, like you have this party or this party. So but you could apply this to any other party as well. He has questions that you should ask about the parties you're not voting for. And then he has questions that you should ask about your own party. And if you're good with it, I'm actually just going to read these questions because I read these and I was like, whoa, those are really good. So, things that you should ask about the party you don't vote for. Question 1, are there any concepts consistent with biblical justice being promoted by the political party that I oppose? Question 2, does that political party show any concern for vulnerable individuals and groups? Question 3, does that political party demonstrate any desire for fair creation or implementation of laws? Question 4, do any of that political party's candidates show evidence of decency, morality, or order? And question 5, how is that political party trying to promote good and prevent evil? So, I mean, the premise being that if you ask these questions, you might actually see, maybe this party's candidates aren't as much the devil as I've been presenting them to be.
But those are very, I think, unbiased questions. What I mean by that is we've polarized politics today where It's like, oh, and this is the narrative in our culture. If you don't agree what I agree, you are evil, get away from me, we must hate each other. And that's just like, no, just literally, do you think there's any good in this person's heart? Any good? Any little smidgen? Change our perspective.
And it's not to say, oh, you ask those questions now, oh, you're automatically going to switch and vote for the other party. But if nothing else, if you can find aspects of good, which again in the first question we talked about, there are things that each party does that represents what we're called to in Scripture better than the others. If nothing else, this will hopefully give you a little bit more grace as you engage with people who vote differently than you. Instead of looking at it and say, oh, well, you vote for that party, like you're clearly a moron, like who isn't following Jesus, you could look and say, oh, well, actually there's some good in there. I could see why somebody might be inclined to, like if they have a heart for this, they might go that way. What are you thinking?
You're setting us up for the next episode.
Okay.
So
all right. Now, questions to ask about your own party. Again, you've got 5 questions here too. So ask this about the party or the candidate you are voting for. Question 1, are there any concepts of injustice that might be motivating my political party? Again, you have to be super honest and raw when you ask it, and you can't, you have to take the blinders off. Yep. Question 2, does the political party I support show any lack of concern for any vulnerable individuals and groups? Question 3, does the political party I support demonstrate any lack of focus on fair creation or implementation of laws? Question 4, do any political candidates in the party I support show a lack of decency, morality, or order? And question 5, how is my political party failing to promote good and prevent evil? So those are some questions I think that are really challenging, and it requires you to be really honest and take a as much as possible an unbiased look at the party that you typically align yourself with. But anything you want to add to those? Otherwise, we'll move on.
No, I really liked your second question on the party that I'm voting for. I forgot what it was off the top of my head.
You really liked it, but it didn't say. I breezed through them pretty quick. Does the political party I support show any lack of concern for any vulnerable individuals and groups? I think that one's going to come up in a couple of different ways in the next episode where we talk about issues. Because you might be listening and think, oh, because maybe you're listening and you can quickly identify things that the other party where they don't show. But it's
right.
Again, you gotta look at your own party as well.
But that's cool because he mentioned, that concern for individuals or groups, but also a question is concern for creation. That's a good balance there.
Yeah, that's good. So earlier you talked about how for a long time there was this perception, and who knows, maybe this is colored by the homes that we grew up in, colored by the social circles that we've run in. I don't know, but you talked about a perception that, oh, well, if you're a Christian, you're a Republican, right? I mean, and I've had conversations with people, and they assume like, oh, well, yeah, you voted for so and so because you're a pastor, or you're a Christian, and it's like, well, wait, like what do those two things automatically have to do with the other? But how do you think it came to be that there was this unhealthy connect? Because I would say it is an unhealthy connection because it isn't an accurate representation of either the political party or necessarily of the church as a whole. But how do you think it came to be that there's this unhealthy connection between evangelicals and one political party over the other?
It's a good question, and I don't have a firm grasp as to where it came about. It could have been about because of one issue. It could stem on the pro-life issue. But there's extreme danger in that to unbelievers, is that if we tie an entire political party into saying this is the representation of the gospel, we have completely misrepresented the gospel. Completely misrepresented. And that's scary Because that means that guy in office, if that's supposed to represent the Christians out there, that guy in office or that woman in office, to an unbelieving world, that could be like, oh, so that person actually represents what a Christ follower is, and that's the gospel message. I want nothing to do with it then. And that is the danger of tying Christ followers to a single political party. I think it can be very dangerous. And I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me, Billy Graham's granddaughter actually had a quote
I heard it.
Evangelicals being careful about that the current president being the epitome of the gospel, because that can. There's a lot of things.
But even then, that ties back into what we talked about last week with the golden calf, right? Like, man, like, no, the only one who's like the full like representation of the gospel was Jesus.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, you could have a solid Jesus following political candidate, and they are still not on a level playing field with Jesus. They're still a broken, fallen,
sinful
human being,
and at times may lash out and do those things. The flesh gets the best. Gets the better of them. But the scary thing is, again, to the unbelieving world, oh, that's the gospel message. I don't want anything of them. So, yeah. I don't know. Where do you think the tie came from?
Yeah, I mean, and that's where I don't know if it's, and maybe it's not. Honestly, if you're listening or watching this would be actually really great. I almost wish we had like a
live audience
right now. I don't know. JB's in the room. Like for you, like growing up, like through your teen years, early adult years, like did you ever, were you kind of aware of that association? Oh, like if you're a Christian, you're a Republican. Okay, I mean, because that was me.
But
like
do you know where the tie comes
all growing
from
up, like I remember,
history?
like oh yeah, like there was always this.
The issue. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So, I mean, so you'd say, I mean, it all boils down to a pro-life
issue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I figured it probably did, but yeah.
I don't know if you're watching or listening, and that isn't you're like, oh no, I've never viewed things like that, or you have insight beyond what we have. I would love it if you would shoot us that information in an email, podcast@theradiantlife.church. Yeah, there you go. So you talked about it a little bit. Do you think there's any other damage, like that inaccurate party and faith affiliation has? Do you think that's done other damage? You talked about, hey, that we got to be careful because if we prop this candidate up and say, oh, this person is the embodiment of the gospel, 100%. But do you think there's any other damage that's been done within the church, or even within the political structure, just by the way this has been?
I'm sure there is. I think maybe some damage has just been our interactions with people who vote for the other party. It's like we can't have a conversation, and we can't agree, or you think this is your stance, and I think this is the right way to tackle this issue, but you think that's the right way to tackle the issue, and we feel like maybe we've done damage because we can't even have civil conversations. I mean, that's why they say at work, don't ever bring politics to work, right?
Well, politics and religion, those are the two things.
And it's like why? Because can we not have a civil conversation? Even though we may vote different parties or candidates, can I still not love each other well and one another and still have great conversations even though we vote differently or disagree with this issue or that issue? Why can't we feel we become so polarized, and that it breaks my heart, and I think it breaks God's heart that this nation, any nation, it's like his creation is so polarized right now.
So do you think in some ways, and it'd be interesting to look back over the history of our country to see when that mentality became prevalent? The things you don't talk about at work or don't talk about really at all are politics and religion. Because in a sense, do you think that could have been a self-fulfilling prophecy? We've told everybody, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion. So now we're at this point where nobody knows how to have an intelligent conversation about politics or religion with somebody else, because for years we've said those are the taboo subjects.
Yeah. And we do. Let's be honest. We get passionate about things we care for. So some of us getting in those conversations when someone is completely on the other end of what I'm very passionate for, I mean, we can get a little offensive and defensive. And I understand that. Like, I get that heart, but we also have to receive what they also view. We don't have receiving their view does not mean that I endorse your view. It means just I'm hearing your viewpoint. We're just coming at it from different angles, but let's still be civil.
Okay. So one of the things,
start bringing up politics. I mean, they say don't bring faith and politics to the work, but they also say don't bring it to the family, right? Like, don't bring it to Thanksgiving. Don't bring it to Christmas.
So you're saying everybody
within the own family, we can't.
So you're saying at Thanksgiving this year, just as an exercise, everybody should bring up politics.
I think it would be a pretty exciting. It'll be more exciting than watching the Lions.
There you go.
On Thanksgiving.
There you go. Somebody said they won yesterday, which that doesn't happen often.
Last 2 seconds they won.
Right.
3-3. Sitting at 500 right now.
So in John 17, Jesus prays that there would be unity among believers. Yeah. Unity. How do you think, like, have we as the church, have we just been asleep at the wheel? Like, how have we got to this point where we have let something become so divisive, within the church?
I honestly think we've taken our eyes off of Jesus and put it on government, and we've put it on political candidates. I mean, it goes back to an episode you and I talked about. We're more passionate and excited about talking about the political candidate than we are about our faith in who Jesus Christ is. We've taken our eyes off of our Savior, and we've focused on that. And if we're going to ever live into Jesus' prayer of unity, it's going to be a heart surrender, a heart issue, getting our eyes as a body of believers back on Jesus. That's the starting point. If we can't do that together, we will have division all over, even in the politics. We have to get our eyes back on Jesus.
Okay, dig in a little bit, though, to unity, right? Does unity mean we all think the same thing?
No.
That's
conformity.
What does that look like, though, then, for us to
read your Bible verse?
Well, no, because this actually, I do want to jump. I'll jump because tied to this, I think, is the idea of humility. Right? I want to read something out of Philippians chapter 2 here. It says this, starting in verse 1, "Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ, any comfort from his love, any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate? Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and purpose. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others." I'm reading out of the New Living Translation for those that are wondering. "Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross." So it's this idea of humility, but there's also some aspects of unity in that passage. What does humility look like in real life? And what does unity look like in real life? If it isn't all of us thinking alike, unity means we can only, we should all agree that this is our stance on a policy, this is our stance on a candidate, this is our stance on, if it isn't that, what is it?
Jesus.
Come on, Kinsey, in here or what? Like, I can make fun of him because I know that he doesn't listen to the podcast all the time. We love you, Kinsey.
I think if we're ever going to get to unity, and I'll be honest, I don't know if I have a full grasp on what that fully embraces and looks like. I mean, I think I have little pieces and elements of what unity may look like. It's hard because I don't think we've seen it in our culture, in our day and age. But if we're going to ever get to unity, you have to start with humility first. You have to realize, it feels like I'm beating this horse to death now. God and others, God and others, God and others. You got to be willing, those two first and foremost. As followers of Jesus, that's where we're at. You have to love God, love others. But humility comes in thinking about others above yourself. If we're ever going to get to unity, that's where it starts. Unity cannot have selfishness in it. It can't. It won't work that way. So we have to start that Philippians 2 verse. It has to start with humility. So an element of the unity is that we are serving one another. I'm thinking about my neighbor more than I am myself. And above everything, I'm thinking God above it all. I'm not thinking my own interests. I'm not thinking what I desire or preference or want. I'm thinking God. I'm thinking others. And I just think that if we start there, this thing of unity will begin to form, and we'll see other elements that we didn't realize that unity had. But it starts with humility, and it starts God and others, God and others. You got something to say.
Well, I think a key thing is understanding what it is we are to be united around.
Jesus.
And that's Jesus, right? I mean, because, when we make that, and this, again, ties back into the golden calf, right? When we have Jesus as the primary focus, right? I think by default, some of the other things that we let cause division will fall away. Because if we know, hey, this is what Jesus calls us to, but I think the humility comes in because we could say, well, hey, we want to be united in our pursuit of what Jesus calls us to. Humility comes in understanding, hey, I want to pursue Jesus, and this is an important aspect of what Jesus calls us to, and here are some political ramifications. Humility is understanding this person over here who maybe votes differently, they're united with us in their pursuit of Jesus as the primary focus. But there's maybe a different issue or a different a policy that they want to pursue because that also reflects what Jesus calls us to.
Yep.
So I think humility comes into play in that as we work together. But I think it's understanding what we're united into. Later not later because it's in Ephesians, not Philippians. In a different letter that Paul writes, he talks about, he uses the imagery of a body. That the church is a body, but it's all united under the head, and Jesus is the head.
Right.
So that's the driving force, right? Right. We know our brain is the. We can't remove your brain. You're in trouble. Like you will not do anything. You will. So you need the head. You need that executive function to make everything else work together. Jesus is the executive function within the church. We need to. Sorry, I'm going to go off all kinds.
No,
of
it goes back to what I've said many times. Make the main thing the main thing, and the main thing is Jesus. I mean that. We joke around in the Christian world. That's the Sunday school answer. You know why it's the Sunday school answer? Because it's right. That's why. And so we got to make the main thing the main thing. And yes, when we make the main thing the main thing, we'll be transformed. We will be formed into His image more, and we'll be able to be more unified. And I think when we are transformed more into the image of Jesus, humility will be almost a natural byproduct. Because I'll see people differently. And remember, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, could have been served like crazy. He says, I did not come to be served, but to serve. And we're called to do the same.
Yeah.
And that's a wrestling thing with faith, or in politics. It's a wrestling match. We're just trying to understand with you listeners and viewers that we're with you in this journey. It's weird sometimes. It's messy. How do we respond? How do we love people? Life is messy. That's why we can't also do life alone. We need each other. Oh, the circle.
The circle. What? Nice. Well, hey, I want to ask because I was looking over there and it looked like he was thinking something. JB, were you thinking something? 1 John 1:7. Are you going to recite it to us? Otherwise, I'll look it up. I don't have that. Oh, you text me. We need to get your phone. We actually need to just plug a mic in, so that
so we can say hey.
So we can say hey.
JB.
Do what? Fact check. Okay.
So
yeah.
While you look that verse up, I watch when I can College Game Day on ESPN for football. And so they got the guys like on the booth talking about the games and this and that. And every once in a while, the camera pans to a guy over in the corner that his nickname is Bear. Bear.
Oh, just Bear.
And that he's got like 3 picks on his board that he picks, but he does like interesting like stats and just this and that every once in a while. I feel like JB's like the Bear to this podcast. Like it's you and I, but then the camera can zoom into him and he's got his mic and he can chime in when we.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, because there have been several times where it's like, oh man, like I know JB is thinking something over there. Like I want his thoughts on this. Yeah. Maybe for the next episode we'll plug in a mic. 1 John 1:7. This is out of the ESV. It says, "But if we walk in the light, as He is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, His Son, cleanses us from all sin." So we need a mic so JB can give us like a brief commentary on that.
You can't walk in the light unless you know the light.
But there's also the fellowship. The fellowship, is that the part, the fellowship aspect of that, which is, the unity and whatnot. So, yeah. Okay, it's texted. Did you just text me again? Okay,
fellowship is
somebody just texted me.
Fellowship is one of those Christian words.
We just need to get him a mic.
Yeah. Where else do you hear the word fellowship? It's definitely within the church, but I don't hear fellowship often outside church. Anyways, side note.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ready to
anything
wrap
else?
up?
I'm looking at the timer, and
this is setting up for the next episode now we get a little more on the issues.
Into the issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this has been episode 41 of Reading Reflections. We called this one Game of Red v. Blue, part 1 probably, because I don't know. We'll probably just call the next one the same thing. I don't know.
No, that's good. Yeah.
I did have another G. Name. Maybe we'll use that one. I didn't bold it. I don't know. So it's been episode 41. My name is Josh Herrema. This is Pastor Ryan Bibb. We're glad you've been weathering this with us as we've been just wading through faith and politics. We would love it if you would like, share, rate, review, subscribe, throw this on your social media. Let people know if you enjoy this podcast. We would love to be able to bring this material to as wide of an audience as possible. Not because we think we're awesome, but we really feel like the content is something that can be beneficial to you and to your family, to your friends, and maybe, hopefully, like this has given you some tools to where if you do have a political conversation at Thanksgiving this year, you're better equipped to do that from a faith perspective, right? All of this is aimed at equipping you to follow Jesus, to live like Jesus in every area of your life, including politics. Well, hey, we're going to push stop on the cameras, then we'll be right back to finish up with our episode on issues.